Today, I am joined by Patrick Casey. Patrick is a writer and the host of Restoring Order. He has written for Chronicles, for American Greatness, and The American Sun. Welcome, Patrick.
Thank you for having me on, Alex. Good to be here.
It's great to have you on. I've heard great things about your work. I have listened to some of your more recent episodes just in the last few weeks, and yeah, I have to say I'm a fan, and I just wanted to chat to you and also introduce you to my audience because they're wonderful. Obviously, wonderful people listening to this. Just wanted you to meet Patrick, and I just wanted to discuss. Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing that's been happening in the last month or so has been the upheaval at Twitter with Twitter or whatever you want to call it, but it's been quite the change. I mean, how do you see that impacting the space, our space, our common space?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that the developments at Twitter have been the most significant of the last few months. Maybe in some time. It's certainly a bit of good news for once. Which, when you have these views, given the power imbalance, given everything that we're up against, can be is always nice when it happens. It doesn't always happen very often. But how has Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter, you asked me, affected the general space? I mean, for one, I'm back on Twitter, which is great. I had a very conservative, guesses as to who would be allowed back on the platform. I thought that you'd probably have some of the bigger MAGA influencers, people like ALX, Jordan Peterson, who I don't think was actually suspended. I think they had locked his account and demanded he deleted a tweet or something of the sort, and he refused to do so. But regardless, people like that would have full functionality restored back to their accounts. That was kind of my prediction, and lots of people have gotten their accounts back, right? And bigger names, smaller names, and I think it's a good development. I have seen some people get suspended, so it's people that haven't really done anything. So it's we're on shaky ground. I would encourage people to keep in mind you can still get suspended on Twitter. So I don't think the TOS has wildly changed yet. But overall, it seems to be a huge win for us. Elon Musk has successfully captured basically an enemy institution, an enemy castle, and that there certainly appears to be more free speech. Now, some people are complaining that this person's not allowed back on, or you can't say this, or so the lack of some feature or something. But you just have to keep in mind, look at is it better now under Elon Musk, or was it better before under previous ownership? And it's undeniable that there's far more free speech available now on Twitter. You can get, you're not just going to get banned for being conservative, which is something that absolutely happened before. So I think it's a huge win. I think it's excellent, and it goes to show that this is. I don't want to say I'm like super pro billionaire right now, but I think that, hey, if there are people that have lots of money and they recognize the issues, those people are going to be abs like Donald Trump in 2016. Those people are going to be the power players going forward. So we should be very thankful.
Yeah, it's a little bit like intransparent to me how much of our guy Elon Musk is, because in some ways he's gesturing towards certain ideas, but at the same time he seems a bit like kind of like a IDW boomer. Also, don't look a gift horse in the mouth, obviously, but at
Sure.
the same time, it does feel to me that if someone doesn't have a complete understanding of, let's say a concept like the cathedral, or like how um, pervasive and emergent all of this stuff is, they might have trouble actually exerting power or actually, you know, wiggling their way out of the challenges that inevitably are going to come from the left, because they're in convulsions at the moment, and
Mhm.
they're really trying to defenestrate him in any way they can. And they still own every institution. I mean, except for Twitter now, but yeah.
Right. Basically, yes. Yeah, no, that's a very good point. That's something I've wondered too. Does he have how much of a plan he has? What his understanding of the power dynamics that are at play are? And I think he has to. he probably gets some of it just from being maybe not from kind of the same theoretical perspective that you or I do, or the average listener of your show. And I think he would certainly benefit from familiarizing himself, if he hasn't already, with kind of broadly dissident right thought. And you mentioned the cathedral, yeah, right, the work of Curtis Yarvin and so forth. If he hasn't familiarized himself with all of that, I think he would certainly benefit from it. But he was talking about, he had this back and forth with the ADL, and he mentioned how he had got together with the ADL and some of these similar organizations to talk about whether or not they would, basically kill Twitter. I think they probably, floated that very openly as a possibility. And he makes it. I don't know who they seem to have some kind of arrangement treaty, and I don't. It's hard to say who violated it, right? But Elon Musk claims that they did by going after the advertisers before he had done anything. So I think if he wasn't very red pilled on power dynamics and how these institutions function before, then he certainly is being red pilled by reality, so to speak, now. So it's very interesting. But how much does he? I don't know. It's hard to say. But what I will say is he's shown a real willingness to defy powerful institutions. The ADL is powerful. It isn't all powerful. Obviously, people right of center, including lots of right wing Jews, probably most right wing Jews, are against the ADL at this point. Because it's openly a partisan organization. There are probably left-wing Jews that feel represented by it, but it's not going to really advocate for Jewish people unless it's doing so in like a left-wing way, in a way that the regime is a fan of. And I just was surprised at how willing Elon Musk was to just say no to the ADL, to just say, hey, screw off, basically. And it's pretty rare to see that. It's pretty rare to see that from the owner of a business, right? It's one thing for a pundit to say that. Lots of conservative pundits are want to critique the ADL, and it's very good at this point. But yeah, I think regardless of how red pilled he is or whatever, it's kind of hard to say. He does have the willingness to defy powerful institutions, which is a very critical component to having success at challenging them.
Yeah, I mean, it's only time will tell, and the kind of the more worrying aspect about Elon Musk is that he is essentially kind of a Bay Area rationalist type. These
Mm,
are the people that he surrounds himself with.
yeah.
He's essentially building one of the most, maybe not largest, or definitely the most famous transhumanist projects ever. Neuralink, and he's definitely on board with some of the more, I don't know, like Ted Kaczynski wouldn't be a fan of Elon Musk. Not saying that we are fans of Ted Kaczynski exclusively on this podcast, but we do understand some of his ideas and their implications, and he wasn't wrong about many of the things. So that's kind of my main reticence with Elon Musk as a character. I feel like, okay, he's going to own the libs, and it's going to be glorious. But essentially, we're on rails, towards a future that he himself is funding, is promoting, is yeah. I don't know what to if I'm optimistic about that.
No, and you're absolutely correct to raise those concerns. We should be very hesitant to project our own worldviews onto Elon Musk, whatever respective flavor of right wing, dissident right ideology we adhere to. Elon Musk is probably not that. I think he clearly recognizes some of the issues. Right, he's talked about how the woke mind virus is a threat to civilization, and he feels that he has, this duty to step into the political arena, and he absolutely has, and all of that is very good. But yes, we shouldn't delude ourselves into thinking without further evidence that Elon Musk is 100% based and red pilled, so to speak, that he has the same values as us. He doesn't strike me as a particularly religious person. So if you're religious, you're going to have some disagreements there. I think he's kind of a good natured Redditor. And I mean that in with no derision, basically. But, he's definitely very pro science. He's, Neuralink and all of that stuff. He's the guy. That's the stuff that really does it for him. And while I think technology obviously plays an important role in civilization, and yes, Ted Kaczynski had some very valid concerns about the state of technological society and the trajectory, of course. But it's Yeah, we just want to be careful, right? If Elon Musk is doing good things at Twitter, opening up the public space, that's good. We don't necessarily, without further information, we should be hesitant to say, oh, he's our savior. He believes in everything I believe in secretly. He just can't say it. You're kind of setting yourself up for failure there. And right, you don't want to support someone past the point where they're really deserving of it. But just to be very clear, Elon Musk is absolutely worthy of our support insofar as he is restoring sanity and free speech to the public square. So we absolutely are indebted to him for that.
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of the criticism against him is that he's revealed himself not to be a free speech absolutist, like
Mm,
he said. But I mean, that's essentially an impossible standard.
right.
And yeah, it just feels a bit insane. I mean,
That's making the perfect the enemy of the good. People love doing that, and I would like to believe that if I didn't get my account back, I would still be supportive of all of this. I understand if, like, people. I've got friends who are waiting to get unsuspended and so forth, but and they're being reasonable. Yeah, I don't think we're gonna ever. At this point, we can't have a 100% free speech platform. Probably anywhere. I mean, it's like they say the fire in the crowded movie theater. I don't know. There's a lot of pressure on any social media company, so I'm not going to defend I'm not going to defend, people who get booted for constitutionally protected speech. But at the end of the day, right, there are going to be, which it's just a question: is he moving it in the right direction? Is there more free speech now than before? And the answer to that is yes. The answer to that is yes. So, can't make the perfect the enemy of the good.
yeah, I mean, essentially, what is and isn't free speech is very much tied to who is and who isn't in power, and what shouldn't be free speech is essentially the exception that we keep talking about. The sovereign decides the exception, and the sovereign at Twitter is Elon Musk, and he's more inclined to agree with people on our side, and I think that is a good thing in the absolute. And like you said, I think this is a really good perspective to bring to the dissident right. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, because we've had so many little schisms and infighting and just like so many fractures along just essentially people with very similar ideological claims disagreeing on, I don't know, what age you should get married, or
Right.
things like that, or even if even the religion question. I think that's a bigger one, but I feel like that's splitting. Immigration's always splitting everything, so it does feel like yeah, we should take our victories where we find them. But then again, I think that what a lot of people in the space see, and is that there is no such thing as partial victories for the right, because every partial victory is essentially creating a wave of energy that's going to instantly get funneled into getting kicked in the teeth, a la January 1st type situations. And then people just they're just sitting and waiting for Red Caesar to completely conquer the whole
Right.
situation, and that's the only winning condition, the only winning situation, and everything else is LARP or whatever.
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective for sure. I remember Yarvin saying once that leftism is able to work incrementally because it's inherently corrosive, right? It eats away at power structures, at traditions, and so forth. So it can just do that indefinitely, and it's probably going to win. Now it ends up destroying itself in the process. It's kind of like a parasite. It destroys the host. Once leftism has destroyed the civilization in question, well, what does it do then? Well, it's kind of done. But whereas the right is based on order, so it's metaphysically different. I think that's absolutely correct. And I recall Yarvin arguing that you, as a result of that, it's often, yeah, like a big political move to restore order in like one fell swoop. He's written about some of this over at his Substack. He has some interesting thoughts there, of course. And I think there's probably something to that. Now, people sitting around, and this doesn't refer to Yarvin, but you mentioned it. Yeah, obviously, people sitting around waiting for Red Caesar and refusing to accept anything as a victory, as a step in the right direction. Because you just are waiting for, I don't know, Ron DeSantis to become Caesar or something of the sort. Yeah, that's not, and I'm not referring to you, of course, but that's yeah, really not a good way of looking at things either. But I think there's probably a good middle ground between those two positions where you recognize that we probably can't do the long march through the institutions the way the left did. Why? Because the doors were more or less wide open to the left in the mid to late 20th century, even the 21st, to occupy these positions of power. But after the left got into power, they shut the door behind them. So we can't do that. Leftism, as we discussed, is corrosive. So it kind of has that going for it, incremental, destruction of our country, of our civilization. Whereas with the right, it's very different. So I think you can balance that understanding of things with understanding that you just don't we don't probably don't have the option just sitting around waiting for Red Caesar to come about. So yeah, take your wins when you can get them. And you mentioned getting kicked in the teeth or something. Were you referring to kind of how when the right accomplishes something that the power structure, the system like strikes back, and there's kind of like a system immune response, something to that effect?
Yeah, I mean, Trump, just the immensity of the immune response against Trump, just built a kind of almost like a mega structure of left wing, activism, NGOs. They even bragged about how they fortified the elections and mainstream newspaper. I don't know what it was, like Time magazine or something. That there's always, every time, like in January 6th, this massive mythical event that spawned, crying and, national mourning and people, literally shaking about,
Right.
grannies walking through, escorted through the halls of Congress. So things like that. So essentially, every outburst, or every equivalent outburst to what the left would do. I mean, not even equivalent. I mean, if you look at all the rioting the left has done,
Right.
unsupervised, but any sort of move in that direction from the right is going to be seen as some sort of fascist apocalypse event, and will essentially be kerosene for whatever the left is planning. And because they own the narrative apparatus, they're going to be broadcasting that day and night. Oh my God, the insurrection, insurrection, insurrection. And yeah, they're going to, kick everyone in the teeth with it. Charlottesville as well. I mean, I know this is controversial maybe to a lot of my listeners as well, but that's, you know, tragic event. Absolutely not a good event in many ways, but at the same time, this, how many times you've heard of Charlottesville,
Right.
proportional to what exactly happened there, is a little bit insane. If just statistically speaking. So that's essentially what I mean.
Yeah, no, and it's a fantastic point, and I hopefully we've learned some of these lessons in the dissident right at this point. That particularly with regards to activism, yeah, I mean, it's possible to say that at the same time that okay, the vast majority of people who were at January 6th, for example, were law abiding, didn't even go inside, things like that. But at the same time, things like that are don't really help us. They don't really help us. And the reason why is exactly what you just outlined, is that the system is really just looking for opportunities to find something that you, as a conservative, as a dissident rightist, whatever you want to refer to yourself as, find something that you're doing that it can say, hey, look, this person is a bad person. They're doing something immoral, illegal, whatever, regardless of whether or not it is. Usually it isn't. And that way they can have ammunition to use against the right. Now, that refers to all sorts of stuff. Statements made, activism done, heaven forbid if you're actually breaking the law, which obviously no one should be supportive of. No one should be doing that, advocating for it, of course. Then yeah, the system is waiting for those opportunities because they can use them against the right. That's exactly what happens. That's why you keep hearing about some of these things like Charlottesville, like January 6th. We're never going to stop. They're never going to stop. Browbeating people who weren't even there, who maybe weren't even like politically aware at the times that these events happened, because it's ammunition, and you don't want to give your enemies any ammunition to use against you. That's a very important lesson politically. Now, what I will say though is when it comes to the system's immune response, which is another one of these kind of neo-reactionary ideas, is you I think if you challenge power, then you're going to get some of that. The question is just making sure that, like, if you challenge power in any way, it's probably going to crack down on you. And of course, we're referring to lawful political challenging of power. So I think it's just keeping in mind, it's not like never activate the system's immune response, because I think that I don't know, maybe even just doing a podcast is you're probably pissing off someone, right? If you're critiquing, you look at the work of revolver.news, and back in 2020 when they were pointing out the specific people involved in regime change abroad who were doing it, attempting to do it here in America. Well, okay, that probably, invokes some of that put them on the radar, I'm sure, of the regime if revolver.news was not already, and things like that. But that would be a good example of doing it the right way. So I think it's just a question of, in everything that you do politically, accounting for the fact that your enemy is stronger than you, and if you are kicking it in the teeth, right, it's like, you're fighting a massive mythical monster or something of the sort, right? You want to be careful that you're not unnecessarily antagonizing it. You want to be sure that you're getting something out of it. So I'm glad you brought that up. It's a very, very good insight.
Yeah, I think it's kind of an inescapable yeah, line of thought. I mean, especially kind of in neo-reactionary circles. And I think it also matters very much when you bring these questions to the table, how they are framed and who you are addressing them to. Because I don't think you can do like mass media. I don't think you can do neo-reactionary Joe Rogan, but you could do, or whatever,
Right.
dissident right at that scale, or you could probably simplify the ideas and make little snippets and try to be a bit more commercial about it, but it's not for everyone. And I feel like another neo-reactionary idea is the idea that the only thing that can displace the current elite is a counter elite.
Mhm.
And essentially the only chance for the space to be influential is if it is influential with people who are maybe silent, and people like disaffected people like Elon Musk. He's had I think he has a lot of personal motivation, because I think his daughter is now trans or something like that. Some sort, it's just absolutely tragic
Yeah.
mind virus bullshit that has happened to him directly, and that's quite a lot of motivation to be looking into this stuff very carefully and to be exerting whatever amount of power you have as an individual to fight it. He's not the only one. And you can see things in Silicon Valley shifting into this direction. I mean, there are many people in Silicon Valley who are absolutely crazy leftists and very, very outspoken about it, probably the majority. But there are a lot of people who are, kind of feeling where the wind is blowing, and they're shifting into that direction
Mhm.
because they're starting to be affected by it. Like their businesses are suffering. They can't get deals done. They can't, their children are being groomed in school. There's just so many things that are directly affecting them. So I think there is a breaking point. And that's probably, in my view, where the breaking point is going to happen. Don't think it's going to be at the polls, or if it might be at the polls, but long after the shift has happened in the echelons of actual power.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Very good point. Yes, elites are absolutely necessary, and I've been I think I made my first dissident right Twitter account in maybe late 2015 at this point, and before that I had been somewhat red pilled over the years, but it wasn't until then that I was like, okay, this is things finally clicked. Just seeing what was going on in Europe at the time with the migrant crisis. They were calling them refugees. Most of them were not, like fleeing the Syrian war and whatever else. Kind of old news at this point, but that's when I really just became invested in this space and realized this is something I care about deeply, and it's not something that whereas in the past I could just put in the back of my head and so forth. And over the years I've seen people have thought that like this is how we win, is you red pill everyone on a whole like wide range of dissident right ideas. We just need literally every person to be aware of like every esoteric right wing idea imaginable, and then you're gonna vote for a guy who's running on the right, the Julius Evola or something platform, and then you're gonna win. And that's really just not how things are gonna play out. So it's a too democratic way of looking at things. Now, we obviously find ourselves within a democratic system, so I would absolutely not eschew voting altogether. Certainly not at the local levels. I think just having places be safe from like the more direct evils of you had the lockdowns, which is largely in the past. Who knows if they come back? Being able to send your kids to public school without them having the trans stuff shoved in their face and whatever else. That's very important. So obviously, keeping places, Florida being an example, local levels safe from globalism and leftist tyranny is very important. But I think what you outlined is correct, that we need elites, and in order to win, it's you just can't do without that. You can't do without that. And I think that the dissident right's purpose is to speak to people who are above average intelligence, ideally very far above average intelligence, and disproportionately wealthy, well connected, things of that nature. And I see a lot of these people on Twitter alone, and I know that behind the scenes a lot of these people are paying attention as well. And we should be very pragmatic at the same time, but that should be who our goal should not be to, I'm not thinking I need to have like, the average person out there who votes Republican but might not be too interested in this stuff beyond, occasional Fox News. And I'm not passing any judgment there. That's not necessary. Our politics shouldn't, abhor someone like that by any means, because ultimately those people are the ones we're trying to, to fight for, among others. But our goal should be to really be building kind of a counter elite, in a sense of speaking to those disproportionately intelligent people and trying to guide them. And that's just what I'm trying to get at here, is that the dissident right is never going to replace the mainstream conservatism. It's not going to become like the conservative movement, because we just don't have access to the mass media in the way that we can do that. But we can influence people in conservative mass media. We can influence people who work on Capitol Hill, actual politicians, right? I'm here in DC, behind the scenes, you meet all sorts of people who are very well familiar with this space in general. So that's what we need to do, right? Our job is not to replace, conservatism. It's to influence it and push it in the right direction.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I also think that the job of, the individual citizen should not be 24/7 politics, consuming politics, and just being completely invested in the political process. Like I feel like that's kind of what happened in the last, at least since the Trump election, but even before that, people are um, deranged by their implication in politics. I mean, it really didn't used to be this way. I mean, obviously presidential and local elections were important, but the idea of politics as entertainment, as kind of the only game in town, and my friend Bennett at Extra Dead JCB has this really good quote. Is he just says that politics is a religion that people actually believe in. And it really, you can feel this in how people relate to their party, their team, red versus, even the fact that, it's red versus blue in the US. You can even have a more, clearly, distinct team symbolism attached to the whole thing. I just feel like that will have to break sometime. I mean, I feel like that's also fueling whatever's going on, and in the U.S. and downstream from the U.S. Everything, you know, everywhere else, places like me and my little hamlet here in Eastern Europe, like it's all this stuff is here already, and it's just being propagated further and further.
Yeah, it's a very unfortunate situation to find yourself in, where your country is roughly half and split in half and at each other's throats politically. You have to wonder if any rapprochement is possible. And I think it's important, while we're on Twitter and we're owning the libs, so to speak, and making fun of journalists and whatever, which everyone should be doing, of course. Um, it's important to keep in mind that like there probably is going to have to be some rapprochement between right and left if America is ever going to. There's going to probably have to be some agreeing to live and let live if America is going to be salvageable as a cohesive political unit. It's these internal antagonisms, which urban versus rural. There's some racial ones obviously as well. Atheist versus Christian. Maybe some of these these are divides that without globalism and leftism there would be some antagonism there, but they've been wildly exacerbated by all of the regime propaganda and so forth. So it's an unfortunate situation to find ourselves in, and this is where people start. I understand the appeal of national divorce, because you look at these divides and these ruptures, and it really does not seem like this divide is mendable. Now, as far as national divorce goes, it's an interesting concept. It has a lot of descriptive value. I don't advocate for that as something. I don't see there's a clear path to that at any point now, but it is worth just considering what the future of this country is going to be. It's so diverse, ethnically, racially, politically, in terms of religion. Although that's probably not the main divide. That you just I'm unaware of any civilization, any country more specifically, or even empire that's been this diverse, that's succeeded. So we're gonna have to do what we can with it. But yeah, it's a very unfortunate place to find ourselves in, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think the options are Brazil or South Africa, but I feel like a jump to South Africa is more likely.
Yeah,
Yeah, Brazil's got a different Marshall vibe to it. I think the U.S. is
yeah,
skipping altogether. So, yeah, only time will tell.
hmm
Um, I also want to ask you about, you call yourself a paleocon in your Twitter bio,
hmm
and I wonder what you think about this idea. Okay, what should the future of a cohesive, successful right wing look like? Because I think fewer and fewer people on our side believe in kind of return, and the fact that there is a way to reestablish kind of maybe an idyllic past, or maybe just the basics of what we had in the past, and that kind of the only way out is through. I wonder what your feeling is. What kind of the principle for a sound right would be.
Sure. Well, I would try to. I think that we should have firm and valid ideals. We should have ideals that are in line with the history of our civilization, of the good, of order, of beauty, these things. And we should be very pragmatic in how we get there. Because again, you can't make the perfect the enemy of the good. But Edmund Burke had, he wrote quite extensively, I think, on the dichotomy between pragmatism and principles. And during the American Revolution, you had some forces in Parliament who were talking. They would wax poetically about the right, the divine, the right that the British Empire had to do basically whatever it wanted to the American colonies. Why? Because they had their reasons, of course, rooted in the divine right to rule. I think it might have been, and just the fact that it was these were colonies of an empire, right? That the monarch had the absolute right. The monarchy had the right to exert power and so forth. And I think Edmund Burke was more of a reasonable figure, in the sense that he said, okay, well, we can talk about rights all we want, but at the end of the day, these people have kind of developed their own thing over there. And I think he favored, maintaining control still, but really just more live and let live attitude to America, while still keeping it in, under the control of the empire. And after the American Revolution, right, America successfully detached from the British Empire. I think he would kind of sardonically or sarcastically remark, well, we had the right to do that, right? So it's the idea that you can talk about these lofty ideals and how you have the right to this is the right thing to do and whatever else, but at the end of the day, you have to account for the situation on the ground. So I would say, we just have to think of, anyone who's paid attention to dissident right stuff, neo-reaction, paleocon, what have you, probably should have a pretty good understanding of what has allowed Western civilization to succeed, to get to the point that it has gotten to. Although maybe not right now. I don't know if we're really in the success phase at this point. We're kind of riding out as the result of inertia past success. I think we should understand how we got here in terms of like the good parts of what we have left. Also, how we got here in terms of decline, and we should be very pragmatic in thinking how we can go from here to a better future. And we shouldn't be trying to. The idea that we can get back to the America of the '50s is it's unattainable. It's just not going to happen. We have to accept, unfortunately, that we're not going back to we're not going to be able to like rewind the clock to a previous era. I guess I've seen a lot of people in conservatism like 1985 now is the new return. People are like, I guess we're at the point where, yeah, the 80s are far better No, it's probably true. I think a lot of the decline was already big, rolling at that point. So we should just be very pragmatic in terms of achieving our goals. So something like recognizing that there are downsides to ethnic diversity in society. It's a controversial subject, but when you look at the data on the subject, you have Robert Putnam's, famous study Pluribus Unum, where he looked at he looked at the effects just overall of ethnic diversity on society, and he saw, well, it's not good for social cohesion, levels of trust, whatever else. And since then, there's a meta-analysis, I forget the name of it, but it went through 87 studies on ethnic diversity, and overwhelming that it was negative. So this doesn't mean that we take people can take that data and maybe reach some immature or irresponsible conclusions with it. But a good way of looking at that is saying, not create like all white country or something of the sort, not, just make America like, maybe just kick out all the Irish too, kick me out, just to return it to like a WASP kind of country. That's not really an option. That's not something I would advocate for, of course. So taking that and saying, okay, well, that means that we should probably limit immigration as a good example, because the more ethnic diversity that we have, right, there's going to be it's lower levels of trust. There are going to be more downsides to all of that. So I think that we just recognizing, as one example, like diversity, there are a lot of downsides to it civilizationally, even though if a little bit isn't bad. It's really just being pragmatic in how you apply these kinds of principles in these lessons that are gleaned through history, philosophy, social science, and so forth. So
Yeah, I think that's very realpolitik is always I think a good idea, but I think just the structure of um, politics, such as you find it in the U.S. and pretty much everywhere around the world, I feel like disincentivizes this perspective. So you're talking about civilization. You're talking about kind of this meta perspective. Okay, this is bad for civilization. Well, the way things are organized now, uh, essentially incentivizes people in the superstructure, the cathedral, to be very much interested in their proximate goals. There is no one who holds the overall view, who is the keeper of civilization. There are keepers of various NGOs, keeper of various local situations. They might have incentives towards their constituencies, but it all kind of boils down to either kind of local status games or money as well. And I don't think everything is about money, but it is an important consideration. And there really isn't someone to be mindful of this stuff. And then you essentially see that immigration benefits a lot of people with a lot of power. And unsurprisingly, the theology of modernity is something that says immigration is sacred, coincidentally or not. But it is,
right.
It really is that's it feels to me that simple sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, immigration is such a hard issue for us to tackle. Fortunately, there's been a very significant and growing opposition to not only illegal immigration but legal immigration, which is arguably the worst of the two. There's a lot of growing opposition to that, and that's good. But when you consider the special interests, so to speak, at play in promoting mass immigration, you've got, because you have interests on both sides. You have interests on both sides, which is a big issue too. You have kind of the Chamber of Commerce, pro amnesty Republican types, the mass immigration types on the right, and you also have, and left of center, of course, they have their own reasons, right? They favor some of the big business stuff too, but they're importing voters for their side. They're aware of that, and they're very consciously thinking of it in racial demographic terms, which is the idea that it's just about money or whatever. I mean, the SPL, there's some interview with the main guy at the SPLC where behind him, I don't know if he knew that this was behind him. Maybe they just interviewed him in his office and didn't realize it at the time. But behind him, he had on a piece of paper the white percentage of the American um, country as like over the years, and showing how it was declining. And so you're kind of wondering, is this something he's trying to show off, or is this something that he just it's like a motivational thing he's got? I mean,
His
it's so
vision
the left
board.
is absolutely viewing things in those terms, and it's important to understand that. I think you can talk about the money when it comes to mass immigration, and that is a factor, maybe more so right of center, but overall we understand that the right is kind of the outer party. The Republicans in most cases are it's there's some differences between what the GOP elites want and what the Democrat elites want. We understand like where the momentum is. We understand where the real power is, and it's far more in the Democratic Party because they're more aligned with the other institutions, the deep state, the media, and what have you. But yeah, their motivation is demographically altering the country, and it brings them more voters, and it just jumbles up the country, right? It's far easier to divide and conquer. It's far easier to rule over a populace that going back to Putnam's research or whatever else, that has lower levels of trust, lower levels of social cohesion, social community, especially when you're trying to replace community and just public life with the state, basically. So immigration is a very important issue. But fortunately, I mean, you have people like JD Vance and even candidates, of course, that unfortunately didn't make it into Congress this time around. But you have congressional representatives, right, in the Senate and in the House who have called for complete bans or large bans on or reductions in legal immigration. So I think that's a step in the right direction. Now, whether or not the GOP actually gets its act together and does anything about that is remains to be seen. But yeah, there's definitely some cause for cautious optimism out there.
Yeah, I think it's very much tied into kind of media portrayals of all this stuff as well. Because I mean, I'm just referring to people that I know in my life here, and I know the people who are the most inclined to be open borders, to be, I don't know, have very strong stances on nut milks and things like that, are people who have consumed a lot of media, non-political U.S. derived
Mm,
media
yeah.
about anything, which is very high status, obviously, because it illustrates kind of luxurious lifestyles and sophistication that people here haven't seen at all, and they mistake, or maybe maybe they don't mistake. Maybe they actually take the actual message of the piece of art, but they really do think that this is how high status people think. And it leads them to clear political conclusions. And I think that's probably the case a lot of the times in the US as well. Like you really need to overcome something. We call it the red pill, but you really need to, break through a certain mental barrier and like kind of rid yourself of programming to even allow yourself to see some of this stuff. Like you really, some of the stuff that people confront themselves with, like some of the stuff that you read, like unqualified reservations or the Dark Enlightenment, or some of the books that circle in our are essentially brute force attacks on this programming. If you allow yourself to get past the first few paragraphs or the first few pages, you are essentially committing violence to a lot of the stuff that you hold dear. So it's I don't know. It feels, I feel, to me, that feels like one of the hardest things to overcome, because it is really insidious and they're really ramping this stuff up. I mean, now I'm being red pill or whatever, having kind of seen how this stuff is made, how the sausage is made, and in media, I can't watch modern media. It's
Yeah.
everything's a hate watch. Everything's kind of extremely disgusting. But at the same time, I see people. Most people don't see it that way. They think this is just the way of the world, and this is an insanely powerful mechanism. I mean, what do we have? God is not dead, or whatever, like weird Christian propaganda, which everyone cringes at because it's not. It just can't have the same cachet as whatever new Netflix production.
Right, it's a very good point. We have the Daily Wire. We have Ben Shapiro. That's our yeah. I mean, that stuff does a lot of the more boomer tier mainstream conservative stuff does pretty well on social media, but you're right, it doesn't have the same, it's in no way comparable to the basic the constellation of liberal media outlets and Netflix, Hollywood, all of that stuff. So it is very unfortunate, as you outlined, that these views that are entirely anti-civilizational are viewed as high status. That is a sign that that something has gone terribly wrong. Because ideally, high status views, which are promulgated by high status people, are pro civilization. Right? It might sound crazy. I know for Zoomers, they'll they growing up, they've never really known that, which is very sad. I think I might have caught the tail end of that, where growing up in the upper middle class suburbs, being like just a conservative Christian Republican was I grew up in Northern Virginia, right? That's not like the deep South or anything. Yeah, that was the standard, right? People's friends' parents, most people were, the idea of people being like pro in the suburbs and like that class being pro trans children. I didn't even know that stuff existed, right? I don't think I had even seen like or known what like transgenderism was until, college or something, just reading about, crazy stuff going on online. So yeah, it's a real, and one of many signs that something has gone terribly wrong, where high status views are deemed to be open borders, xenophilia, right? The exaltation of the other, the denigration of your own, religion and country and so forth. Yeah, it's a sign that something's gone terribly wrong. And on behalf of the sane people in America, I'm terribly sorry for the fact that you have to deal with that in. Pardon me, remind me which country you live in again? Is it
I'm in
Romania?
Romania. Yeah.
Romania,
Yeah.
yeah. So all the way over in Romania, people are being subjected to who knows what in America. When I visited Poland for the first and I guess the only time, I've been to Europe a few times, Poland only once. Nice country, still seems to be holding up relatively well. It's among those in Europe that has not, at least overall, drank the progressive Kool-Aid, and I wish the best to the Polish people that they, maintain some sanity over there. But I was at this gym. I was in Katowice, I think it's pronounced. Anyway, so not like a major town, but not a smaller one. And I was in this gym working out, and there was a very nice new gym, and yeah, and they had a new flat screen TV on every 5 feet. So it was basically a nicer gym than most I've been to here in America. And the people that are healthy, they're nice, they're all Polish. You're not seeing like tons of migrants or anything in there, and so it looks like a pretty healthy civilization. But the juxtaposition between like most of it, everything else going on in the gym, and then what was on the TVs were playing like American rap videos and like pop music videos and stuff. And I'm not like terribly conspiratorial, but like you have like the weird like occult symbolism that they throw into all of these music videos, just being blasted into the minds of people who are working out and probably unconsciously absorbing a lot of this stuff. It was very sad, and it goes to show that the role of technology in spreading the rod, basically, not it's decline, spreading like bad ideas and evil values is not limited by geography. Like, I guess before you could send maybe telegrams trying to subvert the country of the and you write letters trying to subvert a foreign country or something of the sort, but it's a lot harder, it's not as effective. So the technological angle is very important there. And you even see that in America too, because, back in the day, right, the trad rural lifestyle, whatever, it was far more cut off. But these days, people even in rural areas, they're all on iPhones. They're raised on iPhones, just like people in the cities. So they're doing TikTok, they're doing all whatever else. Now things are still a little saner in the country over there, but we just have to account for the role that technology plays in all of this. And I don't think that any nation that is allowing its population to just imbibe endless amounts of Western propaganda is long term going to be able to survive. I'm not a cinephile by any means, and I think some of this like base China stuff that you see people on the right doing is kind of cringy. But just pointing out what some civilizations are doing properly doesn't mean that they're a model for us overall. Some of these countries like China that are just like banning Western media, well, that's probably, I think future historians will look back on that and say, well, that was kind of the right move. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's unfortunate that people in countries like Romania have to deal with I don't know, like which celebrities or shows or whatever else. But
It,
yeah,
it is. It is, and it is really insidious because one of the major kind of catalysts for my red/black pilling was just you know growing older with my friends who I knew since high school or early 20s friends, and just seeing it's a whole generation that was raised with whatever, watching Friends and Sex and the City and stuff like that. And there is kind of like this end of the world caliber nihilism in a lot of these people. And there's I think there's this like a terrible meme that I think you've shared as well, with this cartoon made by whatever furry polycule people. And there's a woman at the doctor, and she wants to get a hysterectomy or something, and the doctor is trying to, see if she really wants to, and then she, just says, "Hey, buddy, this my bloodline ends with me," and in a very cool way, and that was kind of like the punchline of the
Yeah.
cartoon, and all the furries, celebrate, and I know people in real life, non-furry, non-polycule, normal ass people that I grew up with who essentially share this. They believe they have trauma. They believe they have. I mean, they're from normal families. I'm not underplaying the fact that bad things might have happened to them. I'm sure that that has happened, but the idea that there are good reasons to just go gently into that good night and just kind of enjoy yourself. That's the only thing that you really have to do right now is just, have fun, make money, gain status in whatever status game you choose to get involved in. And that's about it. And then you slowly expire, or, expire a bit quicker if you're in Canada or wherever they offer
Yeah.
services for
Jeez.
expiration. So I don't know. It really shocked me. And you know what? It shocked me even more because I used to be like that. I recognize that type of nihilism in myself. I had a point in my life where I wasn't really sure I'd hit 30, you know, alive, and things obviously changed for me in a really good way. But these other people that I know, they're still there, and I don't feel like there's anything I could tell them that's not just gonna, elicit like a sneer and like, eye rolling, and I'm not gonna call you back because you're just, I don't know, imposing things on me that
Hmm.
I wouldn't want
Yeah.
imposed.
Yeah. I mean, what you've drawn attention to here is the nihilism of the current age. And I know there's a strain of right wing nihilism on Twitter, and we're referring to something different, right? Nihilism is a corrosive force, kind of like leftism. They're separate things ultimately. Although I would argue that leftism is kind of nihilistic in its own sense. But yeah, there's a certain type of left wing nihilism where it's, they're very, they do have values. It's not that they don't have any values, but when it comes to the things that matter, they are nihilistic. When it comes to reasons to exist, what matters, and that's because leftism as this corrosive force has withered away, or just corroded and eaten away at all of the things that throughout civilization have provided people with a sense of meaning, right? And it's not even just you. If you take a step back, it's not even just Western civilization with Christianity and there's the various respective and overall cultures of the West. I mean, look at ancient Egypt, right? Look at Chinese civilization, Japan. You have religion, you have some type of traditional gender roles, right? It's going to vary a little bit, but you have the idea that there are gender roles, typically some form of patriarchy. Um, you have just somewhat of a consensus typically on what is right, what is wrong. You have a sense of tribe and in group, which is often ethnic. Maybe it's in some cases racial. For most of human history, it's not. It's more typical to ethnic. Maybe you have like an imperial identity. You're part of this empire. Whatever, you have like some sense of a tribe of people where you have, but these all of that has been eaten away by leftism. So now man doesn't have a god, or doesn't see himself as having one, doesn't have a tribe, right? You're just a citizen of the world, especially if you're a white person, right? Because non-white people in America still have that sense of identities. Largely white people that have been dumb enough to give it up, or have been brainwashed into in whatever else. So it's definitely a sickness in the West uniquely. I don't really see that spreading anywhere else. So you've just kind of lost your sense of tribe, even just like civic nationalism at this point, where you're like, I'm proud to be an American. There are a set of American values. Unless you're defining those American values as right, like trans rights and Black Lives Matter, then you're not allowed to have that either. So all of these things, family, all of these things that were integral parts of civilization throughout history, and I would say are inherently integral parts of civilization, have been eroded. They've been pathologized. It's not just that they've disappeared, it's that people in positions of power have said that these things are bad, that you're a bad person, that there's just kind of this attitude of suspicion toward anyone who still values these things. Yeah, it's very sad. It's very sad. And really just late stage civilization stuff where you have people get tired. This is one of the many hypotheses for why civilizations fall apart is civilizations lose energy. People just get tired. You have Nietzsche's last man who comes into play. You just care about your basic creature comforts. You don't want to offend anyone. You don't want greatness. You don't want glory. If you want status, it's just, just very, you know, petty, credentialism or something of the sort. And that's really where we are. And it's very sad to see that, in our friends and heaven forbid family members spread. So I guess you can kind of do what you can to steer people in the right direction. But yeah, a lot of people that's their identity and they want to identify with, as what we discussed before, is high status, right? It's perceived to be high status. I think you and I would disagree that isn't right necessarily shouldn't be high status at the very least. So yeah, it's a very sad situation. And I think, honestly, so much of what we're doing now is there going to be some kind of like grand restoration of political order in America in the West? It's kind of hard to say. But at the very least, we need to just have there be a space online, offline, where sanity and healthy pro-life, pro-civilizational values can be kind of maintained. We have to keep the torch burning in some way or another so that, no civilization lasts forever, no empire lasts forever. America is an empire. Some would argue it has been since the beginning. I think the figure is like 2/3 of empires have ceased to exist by year 250. So America's not going to last forever, right? And I'm not calling for any like overthrow of the government or anything, but it's just Yugoslavia, the Soviet Union, right? These things tend to dissolve eventually. So, if there can't be some type of grand national restoration of order, then there needs to be something that comes after. And as long as the internet doesn't go down, hopefully all of this stuff will be out there, and we'll have built like a real counterculture, counter revolutionary culture, and something can be done after. But time will tell.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of a mixed bill. It is, depending on your perspective, kind of a
Yeah.
parallax of deep dark black and extreme white, depending on how you want to take it. And I think it's, I think it's a good place to wind down and also ask you the last question. Everyone gets this question. The question of the show: do you have a subversive thinker that you think might be underrated and that might be influential in your thinking and you think people should read more of or kind of investigate for themselves?
Absolutely, absolutely. I've listened to a few episodes of your podcast and I really enjoyed it. And when I was listening to them, and it got to that part, I I had reminded myself that I should be prepared for this, but I was unprepared. But I'm gonna go with my man, Professor Dr. Paul Gottfried. I think he, in terms of intellectual history and just overall political insights, is unrivaled on the right. Chronicles magazine. Everyone should subscribe and read his
Yes.
stuff there. I would also recommend, in terms of like a select book, After Liberalism is a book that played a very pivotal role in my understanding of things, just in terms of tracing the genealogy of liberalism, right? There is a 19th century liberalism, a 20th century liberalism that in many ways is a repudiation of what came before. Now the question of did the first lead to the second, that's something he goes into as well. But he's obviously he's written extensively, but you can still find his stuff in Chronicles, and I find myself very interested in his take on current events and what in history and whatever else. So I would go with Dr. Paul Gottfried there.
That is an extremely good recommendation. I actually talked to Paul Gottfried today. He's coming on the show in January, so
Excellent.
yeah, he's great. I caught his speech at NatCon. It was really a privilege,
Awesome.
and yeah, he's a lovely person. So wonderful recommendation. Thank you so much, Patrick. I want to point people towards your many wonderful sources of content. You are the host of Restoring Order, which people can find on many platforms, including YouTube. Your pieces, like I said, in Chronicles, American Greatness, and the American Sun. And are there other places that people should check out your work at?
Yeah, I would just say go to my Twitter account. I have my link tree there. I caved and I made a link tree. I don't think there's anything wrong
It's
with
okay.
it.
If there's
but,
no OnlyFans on your link tree, it's
yeah,
legitimate.
I promise. I promise. There's no OnlyFans there. So yeah, that's basically Linktree. You can find. I have my article author pages at the various places I've written if you want to go read my old stuff. I have a Subscribe Star live stream, so I've got a Telegram too. Using that a little less these days since I'm back on Twitter. So I would just, if you find your way to my Twitter and go to the link tree, that's the it's the place to go.
Exactly. And Twitter is at Restoring Order USA. Yeah, that's the place to go. Thank you again, Patrick. This has been lovely. And yeah, please do follow Patrick everywhere Patrick is at.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex. Appreciate it.